After the chaos of the First World War, India was just stretched to its absolute breaking point. So the challenge was, well, immense. How do you possibly unite a vast, diverse, and deeply divided subcontinent into one single force? A force that could actually challenge an empire? Well, this is the story of the first great attempt to do just that.
Yeah, take a look at this. This image really gives you a sense of the scale we're talking about. We're not just talking about politics here. We're talking about mobilizing millions of individual people, every single one with their own hopes, their own fears, and their own very personal idea of what freedom even means. That was the huge, almost impossible question facing the Indian nationalist movement back in the 1920s.
Okay, so to really get why things were about to explode, you have to understand just how desperate the situation was on the ground. The end of World War I didn't bring any relief to India. No, not at all. It actually brought the country to its knees and created the perfect storm for a revolution.
I mean, just look at this powder keg of suffering. First, the British paid for the war with new taxes on Indians, which caused the prices for basic goods to literally double. At the very same time, villagers were being forced into the army to go fight a war on the other side of the world, which, as you can imagine, sparked so much anger. And then, on top of all that, crops failed and a horrible flu epidemic killed somewhere between 12 and 13 million people. The suffering was just unimaginable, and any hope that things might get better after the war was totally gone. So, into this powder keg, the British basically threw a lit match. In March of 1919, they passed something called the Rowlatt Act, which let them jail political activists without any trial. The response was immediate. A nationwide strike, called a hartal, was organized. But just look at this timeline. Look how fast everything escalated. Just 4 days after the strike, police fire on a peaceful crowd. And only 3 days after that, the infamous Jallianwala Bagh massacre happens, where British troops just opened fire on a trapped crowd, killing hundreds of unarmed people.
And this right here, this is the crucial contrast. On one side, you had these massive, non-violent protests. On the other, you had a government response that was designed not just to stop the protests, but to humiliate people. Protesters were forced to crawl on the streets, they had to salute all British officials. The British general in charge even admitted the goal was to produce a moral effect, which is really just a chilling way of saying they wanted to create terror and awe.
It was at this exact moment, this tipping point, that a new leader who had just come back to India offered a completely radical, new way forward. His name was Mahatma Gandhi, and his idea was about to change the world.
He called this idea satyagraha. Now, you might hear it translated as passive resistance, but honestly that's kind of misleading. Gandhi saw it as a really active force, a truth force, or a soul force. The core belief was pretty simple. If your cause was right and you were fighting injustice, you didn't need violence to win. Truth itself, that was your weapon. You see, for Gandhi, nonviolence wasn't a weapon for the weak. He thought it was the ultimate weapon of the strong. Like he said here, the goal isn't to hurt your opponent, but to appeal to their conscience, to force them to see the truth of the injustice they're causing. He believed this guiding principle, this dharma of nonviolence, could be the one thing to finally unite all Indians.
So the big question is, how do you take a powerful spiritual idea like satyagraha and turn it into a practical political movement that could actually challenge the British Empire? Well, Gandhi's answer was as simple as it was brilliant. If British rule only worked because Indians cooperated with it, then Indians would simply stop cooperating. And he laid out a step-by-step game plan designed to just slowly paralyze the colonial government. It started with symbolic things, like giving back any awards the government had given you. Then it escalated to a massive boycott of every single British institution, schools, courts, you name it. A huge part of this was boycotting foreign goods, to hit the British where it hurts, their economy. And if the government fought back with force, the final step was an all-out civil disobedience campaign.
So, did it work? Well, just look at the numbers. On the economic side, the impact was absolutely staggering. In just 1 year, between 1921 and 1922, the value of imported foreign cloth dropped by 44%. This wasn't just a political statement. This was a direct shot at the economic engine of the entire British Empire.
And this image, this is what that statistic actually looked like on the ground. These huge bonfires of imported cloth became this incredibly powerful symbol of self-reliance and defiance. People weren't just saying no to a product, they were rejecting what it stood for, this whole system of Western economic and cultural dominance.
Now the whole movement rallied around one single powerful word, Swaraj, or self-rule. But here's where things get really, really complicated. That one word meant very different things to very different people. And this was both the movement's greatest strength and, ultimately, its fatal flaw.
So let's start in the cities. The middle class, they were all in at first. Students left government schools, lawyers quit their jobs. But that initial fire, it started to fizzle out. See, Indian-run schools and courts were slow to pop up, and they were often way more expensive. Even the homespun cloth, khadi, which was a great symbol, cost more than the British-made stuff. So slowly but surely, a lot of people just drifted back to their old jobs.
But out in the countryside, Swaraj meant something totally different, something way more radical. For peasants, it wasn't about boycotting schools. It was about ending the crushing rents and a system of forced labor they called begar. And their struggle turned violent, fast. They started attacking landlords and merchants, exactly the kind of thing the nonviolent Congress leadership did not want to see.
Then you had tribal communities. For them, Swaraj was literally a fight to survive. The British had closed off the forests, cutting them off from food, fuel, and their entire way of life. So they launched a militant guerrilla war, completely convinced by their leader, Alluri Sitaram Raju, that India could only be free through force. And finally, think about the plantation workers in Assam. They were trapped by a law that wouldn't let them leave the tea gardens without permission. For them, Swaraj was this incredibly powerful, simple dream, just to be able to go home. They really believed Gandhi Raj was coming, a time when everyone would get their own land in their village. So they just walked out, defying the law, only to be caught and brutally beaten. So you see what's happening, right? You've got all these different movements, all inspired by Gandhi, but so many of them are veering off into violence, getting further and further away from his core principle of satyagraha. And it all came to a head in a small town in early 1922.
This was at a place called Chau. What started as a peaceful protest at a local market just exploded into this violent clash with the police. The crowd, in their fury, set the police station on fire, killing several officers who were trapped inside.
And for Gandhi, that was it. That was the last straw. He felt the movement was losing its soul, that it was just descending into violence. So he made this absolutely shocking, hugely controversial decision. He called the whole non-cooperation movement off. He believed the people just weren't ready, that they needed to be trained better in nonviolence before a real mass struggle could ever work.
Well, as you can imagine, this decision completely fractured the nationalist movement. A massive debate just erupted over what to do next. You had one camp with older leaders like C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru who said, okay, let's try a new strategy. Let's fight the British from inside their own government councils. But then you had the other camp, the younger radicals like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose, who wanted the exact opposite. They pushed for more mass protests and demanded full, total independence.
So the movement is in chaos, totally divided. And as the Great Depression started to hit India in the late 1920s, the suffering just got worse. They desperately needed a new cause, something to bring everyone back together.
In the end, the radicals won that debate. In late 1929, the Indian National Congress, led by Jawaharlal Nehru, made it official. The new goal was Purna Swaraj, not just self-rule, but complete and total independence.
But hold on, this raises a huge question, right? The last movement fell apart because Swaraj meant too many different things. So how on earth could an even more abstract idea like full independence possibly unite millions of peasants, workers, and middle-class folks who had all gone their separate ways? They needed a symbol.
And this is where Gandhi's genius comes back in. He knew he had to connect this big, abstract idea of freedom to the concrete, everyday lives of the people. He found his answer in the most common, most universal substance imaginable, something every single Indian, from the richest person to the poorest, understood and needed every single day: salt.